After our wedding, my husband refused intimacy every night for a month. When I finally confronted him, he snapped, "My body, my choice." So I filed for divorce, and what happened next shocked everyone. The wedding had been everything I'd dreamed of since I was little. White roses cascading down the altar at St. Matthew's Cathedral in downtown Denver, my grandmother's pearl necklace catching the afternoon light, and David looking absolutely perfect in his navy suit. Our families mingled over prime rib and champagne, toasting to our future, to forever, to the life we were about to build together. I'm Catherine, and I truly believed we were stepping into our happily ever after. David had pursued me for 2 years, showering me with attention, weekend getaways to Aspen, and promises of the kind of partnership I'd always wanted. He was everything on paper: successful accountant, drove a Tesla Model S, owned a beautiful home in Cherry Creek. More importantly, he made me laugh and told me I was his missing piece. But the nights that followed our wedding told a completely different story. Every single evening, when I reached for him, seeking the closeness that should come naturally between newlyweds, he pulled away. Sometimes he claimed exhaustion from work at Morrison and Associates. Sometimes he said he had a headache, or his back was bothering him from golf. Most nights, he'd simply scroll through his iPhone until he fell asleep, the blue glow more important than the woman lying next to him. At first, I made excuses for him. Maybe he was nervous. Maybe the pressure of married life was overwhelming. I convinced myself that some couples needed time to adjust. But as the Colorado summer days turned into weeks, and those weeks stretched toward a full month, my patience began to crumble into confusion, then hurt, then a deep, gnawing pain I couldn't ignore. On the 30th night of our marriage, I finally broke. I sat on the edge of our king-sized bed, watching him scroll through ESPN highlights, and my voice came out softer than I'd intended. "David, we need to talk. It's been a month since our wedding, and you haven't touched me once. Not once. What's going on?" He didn't even look up from his phone. "I'm tired, Catherine. Can we not do this tonight?" "We haven't done anything any night," I said, my voice growing stronger. "I'm your wife. We're supposed to be building a life together, and you won't even look at me." That's when he finally turned toward me, and the coldness in his blue eyes made my blood freeze. "My body, my choice, Catherine. You have no right to demand anything from me." The words hit like a slap across the face. This wasn't the man who had promised to love and cherish me. This was a stranger wearing my husband's face, using my own beliefs about bodily autonomy as a weapon against our marriage. That night, as he rolled over and went to sleep without another word, I lay awake staring at the ceiling of our bedroom, listening to his steady breathing. He hadn't just denied me intimacy, he had denied me respect, connection, and the basic partnership marriage was supposed to represent. In that darkness, something inside me shifted. I realized I had 2 choices: accept this cold, loveless existence, or fight for the life I deserved. And Catherine Morrison, yes, I'd taken his name, though I was already regretting it, wasn't the kind of woman to accept anything less than she was worth. By morning, I had made my decision. If this was his vision of marriage, then I wanted no part of it. But what I didn't know then was that filing for divorce would expose secrets that would change everything I thought I knew about the man I'd married. The law offices of Hartwell and Associates smelled like expensive leather and fresh coffee. I sat across from Rebecca Hartwell, one of Denver's top divorce attorneys, my hands trembling slightly as I signed the initial paperwork. I'd never imagined I'd be in this position just 32 days after saying I do. "Tell me exactly what's been happening," Rebecca said, her pen poised over yellow legal pad. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed, with the kind of confidence that came from winning battles in courtrooms across Colorado. I explained the month of rejection, the cold responses, and that final cruel comment about bodily autonomy. Rebecca nodded thoughtfully, taking notes. "Catherine, I want to be straight with you. Irreconcilable differences cases can be complex, especially when the marriage is this new. We'll need to establish a pattern of behavior that shows the marriage has irretrievably broken down." That's when I mentioned something that had been bothering me for weeks. "Rebecca, there's something else." His behavior completely changed after the wedding. Before, he couldn't keep his hands off me. We'd spend entire weekends at his place, and he was always affectionate, always talking about our future. But the moment we got back from our honeymoon in Cabo, it was like a switch flipped. She looked up from her notes. "That's significant. Have you noticed anything else? Changes in his routine, his finances, his social circle?" I hadn't really thought about it systematically, but once I started listing things, the pattern became disturbing. He'd installed a new lock on his home office. He'd started taking calls outside. His laptop, which used to sit openly on the kitchen counter, was now always closed and carried with him. Most telling of all, he'd changed his banking passwords, something I only discovered when I tried to access our joint account to pay the mortgage and found myself locked out. I said slowly, I think he's hiding something. Rebecca leaned forward. Catherine, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Is there any chance David married you for reasons other than love? The question hit me like a physical blow. What do you mean? You mentioned he owns a home in Cherry Creek. That's expensive real estate. You're a pediatric nurse at Children's Hospital Colorado. Stable income, excellent credit, right? Sometimes people marry for financial security, for immigration purposes, or to maintain appearances. The sudden change in behavior, the complete withdrawal of intimacy, the secrecy around finances, these can be red flags. I felt sick. You think he married me for my money? Rebecca, I make decent money, but he's an accountant. He drives a Tesla. His house is worth more than I'll make in 5 years. Sometimes it's not about the amount. Sometimes it's about credit scores, co-signing abilities, or presenting a certain image. Has he asked you to sign anything since the wedding? Insurance policies, loan applications, anything? My heart started racing. The mortgage refinance. He said we could get a better rate if I was on it as his spouse. And life insurance, he said it was smart financial planning. Rebecca was writing furiously now. Catherine, I want you to go home and look through everything. Every document, every receipt, every piece of mail that's come to your house since the wedding. If David married you under false pretenses, we need to know. I drove home to our house on Bellaria Street in a daze. The beautiful Tudor-style home that I'd thought would be our sanctuary suddenly felt like a trap. I parked my Honda Accord in the driveway next to David's Tesla and sat for a moment, gathering courage. David was at work. He always stayed late on Thursdays, allegedly working on client accounts. I had maybe 3 hours before he came home. I went straight to his office, the one with the new lock. But David, for all his planning, had made one crucial mistake. He'd left his spare key in the same place he always had, taped under the desk drawer where he thought I'd never look. What I found in that locked filing cabinet made me understand that I hadn't just married a cold, distant man. I'd married a predator. And everything, our entire courtship, our wedding, our supposed love story, had been an elaborate con. But I was about to turn the tables in a way that would shock everyone, including David. The manila folders in David's filing cabinet told a story that made me physically ill. I sat in his leather desk chair, my hands shaking as I read document after document, each one revealing another layer of deception. The first folder contained what looked like business correspondence with someone named Trevor Walsh. But as I read the emails, printed out and filed chronologically, I realized this wasn't business, this was strategy. The emails went back 18 months, long before David had ever proposed. Phase 1 complete. One email read. Found the perfect target. Catherine Chen, pediatric nurse, excellent credit score, no debt, family money she doesn't even know about yet. Her grandfather left a trust that matures when she marries, $200,000. She has no idea. My hands went numb. Grandfather Chen had died when I was 15, and I'd always known there was some kind of trust, but my parents had been vague about the details. I'd assumed it was a small amount, maybe enough for a nice vacation someday. Trevor's response was even worse. Beautiful. The marriage loan scam is foolproof if you can hold out long enough. Once you're on all her accounts and the trust funds transfer, we can drain everything and disappear. Divorce court takes months. By then, the money's in offshore accounts and you're free to start over. Just remember, no intimacy creates emotional distance and makes her easier to manipulate. Keep her off balance. I had to run to the bathroom and vomit. This wasn't a marriage that had gone wrong. It was a crime that had been planned for over a year. David Morrison wasn't even his real name. According to a driver's license buried at the bottom of the folder, his name was David Walsh, and Trevor was his brother. They'd apparently been running marriage scams across 3 states. There were photos of other women, other weddings. A woman named Christina in Phoenix, divorced after 4 months when she discovered her savings had been emptied. Another named Jennifer in Salt Lake City, who'd lost her house when David disappeared with her inheritance money. And now me, Catherine, the pediatric nurse who was supposed to be their biggest score yet. My phone buzzed. A text from David, working late again. Don't wait up. But according to the emails I was reading, Thursday nights weren't for working late. They were for planning. Trevor lived in a hotel in downtown Denver, and they met weekly to coordinate their exit strategy. The plan was to clean out my accounts in 2 more weeks, right after my trust fund transferred, and then disappear while I was working a weekend shift at the hospital. I photographed everything with my phone, hands still shaking. Then I found the most damning evidence of all, a handwritten note in David's planning notebook. Catherine is getting suspicious about the intimacy thing. Trevor thinks I should give her just enough to keep her quiet, but that's risky. Easier to gaslight her, make her think she's demanding and unreasonable. The my body, my choice line worked perfectly, turned her own values against her. She's so focused on respecting boundaries that she won't push. 2 more weeks and we're golden. I sat back in that chair and felt something cold and hard settle into my chest. David hadn't just stolen my money and lied about loving me, he'd weaponized my own principles to manipulate me. He'd taken my respect for consent and twisted it into a tool for emotional abuse. But David Morrison, or whoever he really was, had made a crucial miscalculation. He'd assumed I was weak, trusting, and naive. He was right about 2 of those things, but dead wrong about the 3rd. I called Rebecca Hartwell's emergency line. Catherine? What's wrong? Rebecca, cancel the divorce filing. We're not getting divorced. My voice was steady now, cold and clear. We're sending my husband to prison. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. What did you find? Fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. David Morrison doesn't exist. My husband is a professional con artist, and I have documentation of everything. I looked around his office, at the expensive furniture he'd bought with stolen money, at the fake life he'd built to trap me. But here's the thing, Rebecca. He doesn't know that I know. And I'm going to use that advantage to destroy him. Catherine, if this is criminal fraud, we need to involve the police immediately. We will. But first, we're going to let David finish his plan. Let him think he's winning. Because the bigger the crime, the longer the prison sentence. And I want him to pay for every woman he's ever done this to. I hung up and carefully returned everything to exactly how I'd found it. Then I went to our bedroom, got into our cold, lonely bed, and waited for my fake husband to come home from planning my destruction. Tomorrow, I would start planning his. The next morning, I called in sick to Children's Hospital for the first time in 3 years. I needed the day to set my trap, and David's routine was predictable enough that I knew I had exactly 8 hours to work. Rebecca met me at a Starbucks near the Cherry Creek Mall, bringing along Detective Maria Santos from the Denver Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. Detective Santos was younger than I'd expected, maybe mid-30s, with sharp brown eyes that missed nothing. Catherine, what we're dealing with here is sophisticated fraud, Detective Santos explained as she reviewed the photos I'd taken of David's files. The Walsh brothers have been on our radar for 2 years, but they're careful. We've never been able to get enough evidence to make arrests stick. So what I found, is it enough? Rebecca nodded grimly. More than enough. But Detective Santos is right. These guys are professionals. If we move too fast, David could destroy evidence or disappear. We need to catch him in the act of transferring your money. Which means, Detective Santos said, we need you to play along. Act normal. Don't let him know you suspect anything. Can you do that? I thought about the month of rejection, the cruel way he'd used my own values against me, the photos of all those other women he'd destroyed. I can do whatever it takes to stop him. We spent the morning setting up the operation. Detective Santos explained that they'd been trying to build a case against the Walsh brothers for months, but their previous victims had been too embarrassed or financially devastated to cooperate fully. This was their chance to get both brothers and potentially break up the entire operation. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. I would act normally, even be extra affectionate if I could manage it. Meanwhile, the police would be monitoring all my financial accounts, ready to trace any transfers. When David moved the money, which their pattern suggested would happen within the next 10 days, they'd arrest both brothers simultaneously. There's one more thing, Detective Santos said as we prepared to leave. We checked David's real background. He's not just a con artist, he's dangerous. He's never been violent that we know of, but cornered criminals can be unpredictable. If anything feels wrong, if his behavior changes at all, you call 911 immediately. That evening, I cooked David's favorite meal, grilled salmon with asparagus, the same dinner I'd made him countless times during our courtship. When he walked through the door at 6:30, I greeted him with a smile. "This smells incredible," he said, hanging his suit jacket on the back of a chair. For a moment, he looked almost like the man I'd thought I was marrying. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion. I just missed us," I said, and it was a strange kind of truth. I missed the illusion of what I'd thought we had. "I know things have been difficult lately. I want to try harder." Something flickered behind his eyes, surprise, maybe suspicion. But then he smiled, the same charming smile that had made me fall in love with a fiction. "I appreciate that, Catherine. I've been under a lot of stress at work. The Henderson account is a nightmare." He kissed my cheek, and I had to force myself not to flinch. "Maybe we can try to reconnect." We had dinner by candlelight, and David was more talkative than he'd been in weeks. He told me stories about his fake job, asked about my patients at the hospital, even laughed at my jokes. It was a perfect performance of the man I'd thought I'd married. Later, as we got ready for bed, he actually reached for me. I let him kiss me, let him hold me, even as my skin crawled with the knowledge of what he really was. Because every minute he believed his plan was working was another minute the police had to prepare their case. "I love you," he whispered against my hair, and the lie was so smooth, so practiced, that I almost believed he believed it himself. "I love you too," I whispered back, and that was the truest thing I'd said all day. Because I did love him, I loved the man I'd thought he was. And that made his betrayal even more devastating. As David fell asleep beside me, I stared at the ceiling and counted down the days. Soon, the man who had weaponized love would learn what real justice felt like. He'd used my trust to steal my money and my heart to break my spirit. But Catherine Chen, and yes, I was taking my name back, was about to show him that he'd picked the wrong woman to con. The call from Detective Santos came at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, just as I was getting ready for my shift at Children's Hospital. "Catherine, it's happening. Trevor Walsh just walked into First National Bank downtown. We think this is it. They're moving your money today. Are you ready?" My hands were steady as I held the phone. "I'm ready." "Remember, act completely normal. Go to work, follow your regular routine. We have unmarked units watching both the bank and your house. The moment they make the transfer, we'll have them." I hung up and looked at David, still sleeping peacefully in our bed. Today was the day his entire world would collapse, just like he'd planned for mine to collapse. I went through my morning routine exactly as always: shower, coffee, toast with strawberry jam. David woke up as I was putting on my scrubs. "Big day today," he said, stretching. "I might be late again. The Morrison account needs to be finished by Friday." Even now, he was lying. There was no Morrison account, just like there was no David Morrison. "No problem. I'm working a double anyway, won't be home until midnight." That was true. I'd specifically requested extra shifts this week so I'd be at the hospital, surrounded by people, when everything went down. He kissed me goodbye, and I let him, even though I knew it was the last time. "Love you," he said. "Love you too," I replied, and walked out to my Honda Accord, knowing I'd never see my husband again as a free man. My shift at Children's Hospital passed in a blur. I threw myself into work, caring for my young patients, trying to focus on something good and pure while I waited for my phone to ring. Around 2 p.m., I was helping 7-year-old Emma Rodriguez with her physical therapy when my phone buzzed. "Detective Santos, Phase 1 complete. Both subjects in custody. Need you at the station in 2 hours." My knees almost buckled with relief. Emma looked up at me with concern. "Miss Catherine, are you okay?" "I'm perfect, sweetheart," I said, and for the first time in a month, that was true. "Let's finish your exercises." The Denver Police Department looked exactly like it did in movies: fluorescent lights, busy detectives, the smell of bad coffee and stress. Detective Santos met me at the front desk, her expression victorious. "Catherine, I have to tell you, this was textbook perfect. We caught them in the act of transferring $180,000 from your trust fund to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. We have everything: wire transfer records, communications between the brothers, evidence of at least 6 other victims across 4 states." She led me down a hallway lined with interrogation rooms. Through a one-way mirror, I could see David, or Trevor. His real name was David Walsh, which made the whole thing even more twisted, sitting at a metal table in handcuffs. He looked older somehow, his face haggard, his expensive suit wrinkled. "He's been asking for you," Detective Santos said. "Keep saying there's been some mistake, that you'll vouch for him. Do you want to see him?" I looked through that mirror at the man who had held me, kissed me, promised me forever, all while planning to destroy my life. The man who had turned love into a weapon and marriage into a crime scene. "Yes," I said. "I want to see him." Detective Santos opened the door, and I walked into that sterile room where dreams go to die. David looked up at me with desperate eyes. "Catherine, thank God. This is all a misunderstanding. These police officers think I'm some kind of criminal. Tell them who I am. Tell them about our marriage." I sat down across from him, separated by a metal table and a mountain of lies. When I spoke, my voice was quiet, steady, and cold. "I know exactly who you are, David Walsh. I know about Trevor, about the other women, about the trust fund, about everything." His face went white. "I've known for a week. Catherine, I can explain." "No," I said, and the finality in my voice cut him off. "You remember what you told me that night when I asked why you wouldn't touch me? You said, 'My body, my choice. You have no right.' You were absolutely correct. You made your choice." I stood up to leave, then turned back one last time. "I hope it was worth it, David. Because you didn't just lose my money, though you're going to pay every penny back. You didn't just lose your freedom, though you're going to prison for a very long time. You lost the one thing you couldn't steal, the chance to be genuinely loved by someone who would have given you everything freely." As I walked out of that room, I heard him calling my name, his voice breaking. But Catherine Chen doesn't look back. She never did. The trial of David and Trevor Walsh became the biggest fraud case Denver had seen in years. The local news stations ate it up, the marriage con, how two brothers scammed women out of millions. I found myself at the center of a media storm I'd never wanted, but I was determined to see it through. Rebecca Hartwell had been right about one thing: when criminals are this organized, the case becomes about more than just one victim. During the investigation, Detective Santos and her team uncovered 7 other women across Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and Nevada who'd been targeted by the Walsh brothers' marriage scam. Each story was heartbreakingly similar to mine. They'd meet a charming man, usually through dating apps or at professional networking events. He'd court them intensively, propose quickly, then immediately after marriage, become cold and distant while systematically draining their accounts. The pattern was so consistent it was like they'd written a playbook. The woman who hit me hardest was Amanda Foster, a teacher from Phoenix. She was 34, same age as me, and Trevor had targeted her inheritance from her deceased parents. She'd lost everything: her house, her savings, even her car. When she tried to report it, Trevor had already disappeared, leaving her with massive debts and a broken credit score. "I felt so stupid," Amanda told me over coffee when she came to Denver to testify. "Everyone kept asking how I didn't see the signs. But when someone tells you they love you, when they make you feel special and chosen, you want to believe it." "It's not stupidity," I said. "It's being human. They're predators who studied how to exploit trust." The day I testified was the hardest day of my life. The defense attorney, a sharp-dressed man named Richardson, tried to paint me as a vindictive ex-wife making up stories for revenge. "Isn't it true, Miss Chen," he said during cross-examination, "that you were angry about your marriage not living up to your expectations? Angry enough to fabricate this elaborate story?" I looked directly at David as I answered. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit now, his hair disheveled, looking nothing like the successful accountant who'd swept me off my feet. "Mr. Richardson, I have documentation of every crime your client committed. I have his own handwriting describing his plan to drain everything and disappear. I have photographs of files containing information about 6 other women he and his brother victimized. This isn't about a marriage not living up to expectations. This is about a professional criminal who weaponized love to commit fraud." The prosecutor, District Attorney Lisa Park, had prepared me well. She walked the jury through every piece of evidence: the fake identity documents, the offshore accounts, the documented pattern of behavior across multiple states. By the time she finished, the jury looked like they wanted to convict David themselves. But the moment that will stay with me forever came during David's own testimony. His lawyer had advised him not to take the stand, but David's ego couldn't resist one last performance. "I genuinely cared for Catherine," he said, looking directly at me with those blue eyes that had once made me believe in fairy tales. "Yes, I made mistakes. Yes, I wasn't honest about my financial situation. But I never meant to hurt her." D.A. Park stood for her cross-examination. "Mr. Walsh, you wrote in your own planning notes that you used Miss Chen's values about bodily autonomy to manipulate her emotionally. You wrote, and I quote, the 'my body, my choice' line worked perfectly, turned her own values against her. Does that sound like someone who genuinely cared?" David's composure cracked. "You don't understand the pressure we were under." "We? Are you referring to your conspiracy with your brother Trevor to defraud multiple women?" "I loved her," David said desperately, and for a split second, I almost believed him. "I really did love her." D.A. Park walked over to the evidence table and picked up a photograph. One of the pictures I'd found in David's files, showing a woman named Jennifer from Salt Lake City on what I now knew was her wedding day to Trevor. "Mr. Walsh, is this a photo of a woman your brother victimized using the exact same methods you used on Miss Chen?" David's face went pale. "Yes, but..." "And this woman, did your brother tell her he loved her too?" "Yes." "And this woman," D.A. Park picked up another photo, "and this one, and this one. Did your criminal enterprise tell all these women they were loved while systematically robbing them?" David's voice was barely a whisper. "Yes." "So when you say you loved Miss Chen, you're using the same word you and your brother used to describe your feelings for every woman you criminally targeted. Is that correct?" The silence in that courtroom was deafening. David looked at me one last time, and I saw something that might have been genuine regret. But it was too late for regret. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts: fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, money laundering. David was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Trevor got 14. As they led David away in shackles, he turned back to me. "Catherine, Goodbye, David," I said quietly. And I meant it. That was the last word I ever spoke to the man who had tried to steal my life. 1 year later, I was standing in the kitchen of my new apartment in Capitol Hill, making pancakes for one and actually enjoying the solitude. The morning sun streamed through windows that belonged to me, in a space that no one could take away because I'd earned every square foot of it honestly. My phone buzzed, a text from Rebecca Hartwell. Restitution check arrived. $180,000 plus damages. You're officially whole again. I smiled and set the phone aside. The money was nice, but I'd been whole for months now. Whole in ways that had nothing to do with my bank account balance. The past year had been a journey I never could have imagined. After the trial, I'd taken a leave of absence from Children's Hospital and started speaking at conferences about fraud prevention. The FBI asked me to help train agents to recognize marriage scam patterns. I'd testified in 3 other states, helping put away criminals who preyed on women looking for love. Detective Santos had become a friend, and she'd updated me on the broader impact of our case. The Walsh brothers' conviction had led to a multi-state task force that had already prevented 12 other marriage scams and arrested 6 more criminals. Amanda Foster, the teacher from Phoenix, had gotten her life back and started a support group for fraud victims. Jennifer from Salt Lake City had gone back to school and become a financial counselor. But the best part of my new life was the simplest. I was happy. Genuinely, deeply, peacefully happy. I'd learned the difference between being alone and being lonely. I discovered that a quiet Saturday morning with coffee and a good book was infinitely better than sharing a bed with someone who saw me as a mark rather than a partner. My doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. I opened it to find a delivery man holding a bouquet of sunflowers, my favorite, though I'd never told David that. The card read, "For the strongest woman I know. You turned your pain into purpose and helped so many others. Proud to call you friend. Amanda." As I arranged the flowers in a vase, I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago. Catherine Chen, pediatric nurse, 34 years old, believing she'd found her soulmate and her future. That woman had been trusting, hopeful, maybe a little naive. She'd believed that love was always honest and that marriage was always sacred. The woman I am now knows better. I know that love can be weaponized, that trust can be exploited, and that sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones we let closest to our hearts. But I also know that surviving betrayal doesn't have to make you bitter. It can make you stronger, wiser, and more compassionate toward others who've been hurt. I still work at Children's Hospital. Kids don't lie about their pain, and their joy is absolutely genuine. But now I also travel 2 weekends a month, speaking to women's groups, police departments, and community organizations about recognizing fraud. I've helped create legislation in Colorado requiring dating apps to verify user identities. I've helped establish victim support programs in 3 states. David Walsh is in federal prison in Florence, Colorado, serving his 12-year sentence. I don't think about him often anymore, but when I do, I don't feel anger. I feel something closer to pity. He spent so much energy creating elaborate lies when the truth might have been enough for someone, somewhere. Trevor got out of prison last month on early release for cooperation with other fraud investigations. Detective Santos called to let me know, but is required to stay in California and can't contact any of his victims. Part of me wonders if he learned anything, if prison changed him. But mostly, I don't care. The Walsh brothers are someone else's problem now. My phone rang as I was finishing my pancakes. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was Denver. Catherine? This is Dr. James Martinez from Children's Hospital. I know you're technically on sabbatical, but we have a situation here that I think you'd want to know about. Dr. Martinez explained that they'd admitted a 7-year-old girl whose mother was a recent fraud victim. The child was having trouble trusting adults, was withdrawn and scared. The mother had mentioned seeing one of my speaking events and wondered if I might visit. "I'll be there in an hour," I said without hesitation. As I drove through Denver toward the hospital where I'd been working when my world fell apart, I reflected on how strange life could be. A year ago, I'd thought my story was about finding love and building a future. Now I understood it was about learning to trust myself, about turning pain into purpose, and about the unexpected ways we can help each other heal. The little girl's name was Sophia, and when I walked into her room, she was coloring a picture of a house with no doors. Her mother, Carmen, was sitting beside the bed looking exhausted and heartbroken. "Hi, Sophia," I said, sitting down at her eye level. "I heard you like to color. That's a beautiful house." She looked at me with big brown eyes that held too much sadness for someone so young. "There's no doors because bad people can't get in." I nodded seriously. "That's very smart thinking. Can I tell you something, though? Sometimes good people need doors to get in too. People who want to help." Sophia studied my face for a long moment. "Are you a good person?" "I try to be," I said honestly. "And I think you are too." We spent the afternoon coloring together, houses with doors, gardens with flowers, families with smiles. As we drew, I told Sophia a story about a princess who learned to be her own hero, who discovered that being strong didn't mean never getting hurt, but learning how to heal and help others heal too. By the time I left, Sophia was smiling and her mother was crying, but they were good tears, the kind that come from hope instead of despair. Driving home through the Colorado sunset, I realized this was what David Walsh had never understood. Real power doesn't come from taking from others. It comes from giving, from lifting people up, from turning your own broken places into bridges for other people to cross. My marriage to David Morrison had lasted exactly 30 days. But the woman I became because of that betrayal, Catherine Chen, survivor, advocate, voice for the voiceless, she was going to last a lifetime. I pulled into my apartment complex, parked next to my reliable Honda, and walked up to my cozy 1-bedroom apartment. No Tesla, no Cherry Creek mansion, no fake fairy tale. Just the truth, finally, and that was more valuable than any con artist could ever steal. As I turned the key in my own lock, opening the door to my honest life, I smiled. David had told me my body, my choice to hurt me. But he'd accidentally given me the most powerful lesson of all, my life, my choice. And I was choosing freedom, truth, and the kind of love that can't be faked or stolen. That night, I made myself dinner, read a good book, and went to sleep in my own bed, in my own space, surrounded by my own dreams. And Catherine Chen, pediatric nurse, fraud survivor, and accidental.